Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of November 2021. Just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can I also welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not to speak or participate? Can I please remind you all to switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting? In addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings which have been previously circulated? Namely, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand via Teams? I will assume that you have all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you are referring to? The first item on the agenda is to do a roll call. I am Councillor Robert Wood, the chair for today, and I am present. I will now call on Chloe, the Democratic Services Officer, to take the roll call. If you would, please, Chloe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've marked you as present. We've had apologies from Councillor Sheila Penry. Councillor Angharad Aubrey.
Present.
Councillor Charlotte Goldsworthy.
Present, Chloe.
Had apologies from Councillor Scott Jones. Councillor Dennis Keogh.
Present, Charlotte.
Councillor Adam McGrath.
Present.
Councillor Wyndham Griffiths.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Rosalind Davis.
Presennol, present.
Councillor Joe Hale.
Present, Chloe. Thank you.
Councillor Simon Noyle. Councillor Stephanie Lynch. And we've got invited member Councillor Helen Clark. Councillor Helen Clark.
Yeah, present, sir.
Cabinet members Councillor Mike Harvey.
Yeah, present, Chloe.
And Councillor Annette Wingrave.
Present, Chloe.
And officers Nicola Pierce.
Apologies from Nicola today, Chloe.
Thank you. Mike Roberts. Mike Roberts.
I think he's got a technical problem.
Present.
Oh.
Okay.
Griffiths.
Present.
Present, Chloe.
Buck.
Present, Chloe.
Bette Powney.
Present.
James Davis. Ansan.
Apologies from Asan, he's had to attend another urgent meeting.
Thank you. Justin Griffiths.
Present, Chloe, thank you.
And Jane Woodman Ralph.
Present, Chloe.
Is there any officers that I've missed who are participating in today's meeting? No. Oh, Councillor Keogh.
I apologize, Chloe. I'll try and remember to call you Chloe and not Charlotte.
Oh, no worries. Thank you, Chair. That's the roll call complete.
Okay, thanks for that, Chloe. We'll move on to Chair's announcements. Before I announce which items we have chosen to scrutinise, I would like to bring in Dave Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. One of the report items today, in connection with the Godra Graig options report, we're requesting that it be withdrawn from consideration at today's meeting to enable officers to seek further supplementary information, and that we'll bring a report back to the next committee.
Thanks, Dave Griffiths. We're all happy with that, are we? Right. I would like to announce for the information of officers and the public that we have chosen to scrutinise agenda items 8, 10, 12 and 16 on the Cabinet Board agenda. We also have one item on our scrutiny agenda which we will be looking at. Are there any other items members wish to scrutinise? Okay, I'll move on to declarations of interest. Can members please indicate whether they have any declarations of interest in relation to the items that we have chosen to scrutinise today? Councillor Mike Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Item 8, the annual parking report. It mentions the Park Mark Safer Parking Award. I assess car parks for that award for South Wales Police. Thank you. It's not, I don't have to leave a meeting and I'm allowed to vote. Thank you.
You've got a dispensation, okay, that's no problem. Okay. In that case, then we'll go on to item 4, which is Parking Enforcement Operation 2021. The next item on the scrutiny agenda is a report on Parking Enforcement Operation 2021. This report is for information and the reporting officer is Steve Cook. Do officers have anything to add to the report, or shall we move straight to questions?
We're happy to move straight to questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll take the first question in that case, which is, given that we give out permits for residential parking, do we restrict the amount of permits we give in regards to the parking spaces available? Does this have any impact then on the neighbouring streets? And I would say especially in terraced areas, because we know the pressures that are raised there. Okay.
Yes, Chair, perhaps if I come in on that point, in terms of the current policy, we permit 2 residence parking permits per property. That's reduced to 1 permit if there is an off-street parking area or a garage to the property. So the current permit scheme doesn't guarantee you a space within the residence bays. It just offers residents a better opportunity to park closer to their properties. The problem or the difficulties we have is that when we assess a street, we always have to retain about 30% of that street as unrestricted. That will allow for visitors or people that can't park within the bay to then be able to park in an unrestricted area. Where we've got some very, very restricted streets, inevitably, sometimes residents will have to park on nearby other streets if there is parking space available. And unfortunately, with the increase of the number of vehicles now privately owned, what we're finding right across the county borough is that there are obviously more cars than there are physical spaces on street in some areas, particularly where we've got residential properties that are of terraced properties in their nature. So Steve, I don't know if Steve would like to add anything to that, in case I've missed anything.
No, Dave, you covered everything in that. It's the policy that we've inherited, I think, from West Glamorgan days that we've kept going up until now.
Thanks. I think you've answered the question. So if there are 6 spaces, for example, that are over to residential parking, and I'll make up any name like Knox or whatever, if there's we don't issue 7 permits, or do we monitor if permits have expired? Or
they normally get a yearly permit, and depending on, you know, if the bay would accommodate 6 vehicles, then you could issue 12 permits, 2 per household, but
right,
only 6 cars will be able to park in the bay at the same time.
Okay, I think that's answered the question.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Galsworthy.
Chair, sorry, before Councillor Galsworthy come in, just for the recording, I note that Councillor Lynch is present. Can I just check if Councillor Lynch has any declarations of interest in relation to any of the agenda items today? Could she let us know? Councillor Lynch, could you let us know if you have any declarations of interests?
I don't know whether she's having technical hitches.
Yeah.
I will endeavour now to see and see what's happening with Councillor Lynch and ask her when she is present if she could put her hand up.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Sorry, carry on, Chair.
Councillor Goldsworthy, I'll just bring David Griffiths back in a second, and just to see that. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. There was one other point that I didn't make, is that for a permit to be issued on a street, the car must be registered at the property via the driver vehicle licensing centre. So the vehicle has to be registered to that address as well. So I forgot to mention that.
Thanks, David Griffiths. Okay, Councillor Goldsworthy.
Just another one. All of us obviously have them issues with the car parking. Like one terraced house could have, if they got 3 kids, obviously still living there, 5 cars, and that's without obviously work vehicles as well if they bring the vans home. What I've been like looking at for some time is, as a local authority, we also in some of the areas, not all, but have sort of maybe suitable areas where parking bays could be made in addition, whether it's around the corner from these streets or, you know, it's like the verges and things like that. And, you know, I'm not expecting any sort of like, you know, amazing sort of parking bays, but maybe there was something that we could use where a digger or, you know, like chip bins and things like that could be explored. And even if it's put on the work programme, maybe. And because what we need to be doing more is actually looking for solutions rather than just saying what we can and can't do. And obviously, if there are solutions available, then let's explore if there is any grants or funding available that we could actually make it happen. And, you know, obviously we say that we're a can-do council, so I think we need to be showing that as well. So that was just my point really on that.
Thanks, Councillor Goldsworthy. Did you want to come back in, or did you want to take the questions in the whole?
Perhaps it's easier if we take them as they come, Chair. Yeah, so there are no specific grants to create off-street residential parking bays. There have been in the past, a number of years ago, a scheme within the programme where we were able to create off-street parking bays. But as of late, with the downward pressures on the highways maintenance budget, they are nice schemes to have. But my colleagues in network management, and Mike will comment on this, I'm sure, we have to prioritise that work such that we are dealing with the health and safety issues in the first instance. But as I say, we do occasionally manage to do them if unplanned monies become available, but they're very, very few and far between. I don't think we've issued a residence parking lay-by for a number of years. But as I say, if I don't know if Mike wants to comment around the wider network management programme and highways programme in that regard, but we're always open to suggestions, and we'd always try and create additional parking wherever we can for residents. So thank you, Chair.
Mike Roberts, do you want to come in?
Just to say, I think Councillor Goldsworthy was referring to pursuing grants and things. Quite happy to, obviously, if we know about issues in wards, as officers, we're able to look out for opportunities for funding. So whatever the situation might be with, say, maintenance funding, if we do know about issues in wards, then when grant opportunities come along, for example, we can look at those. So we're quite happy to do that with members.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I'll take the questions now in the order that people have asked. Councillor Wyndham Griffiths. Hang on, come back at the end. I have got you down, don't worry.
Okay.
Councillor Wyndham Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Parking. We've all got problems with parking, and we all know as councillors we get apply for traffic orders. We're told that they cost quite a bit of money to do, and we get them put down, and it's all hunky-dory, but yet we don't enforce them because we haven't got the personnel or we haven't got the system. So what I would like, if possible, if it could be looked into, that the whole of the parking force be utilised on a sort of shift system, possible. I think we probably need more personnel. That's another headache for people. And of course, we've got one mobile van that goes round. So I think the whole concept of the parking should be looked at again. I know that with Steve Cook's help, the other day, I've got a bit of a notorious place in my ward. We did get somebody out in the early evening, and lo and behold, it was fruitful. Now, I'm not advocating, I don't like having tickets for everybody, but these people are flouting the laws, they won't listen. I think we have got to do something about it. And if we do have to employ people, if we make more people realise that they're going to pay, it could be funded through that. It could be self-funding. So I'm just wondering what your views are, Mr. Griffiths. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. If I can bring in Dave Griffiths, but just before I bring you in, I think the vehicles have been successful, and what we're trying to do as a committee, and obviously you can appreciate this as well, is if these are cost neutral enterprises, increasing the number of vehicles, etc., then I think that's the feeling that we have going forward that we want to get to. There we are, Dave Griffiths.
No, thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I deal with perhaps the camera van, and then perhaps Steve will give you a little bit more information around the staffing and how the shift patterns work. I would agree that the CCTV van, since we've introduced it, has been very effective. But I need to explain that the CCTV van can only enforce under the legislation certain traffic orders, and by that, by way of example, they can enforce the no stopping at any time orders. So that'll be the double yellow lines where you see additional strikes on the curb line. So you see double strikes on the curb line. So the van can enforce those. They can enforce lay-by, bus stops and bus laybys, and they can. What's the third one, Steve? They can
zigzags and school orders.
Zigzags and school orders. So in terms of the vehicle, it was a complex actual change that we made, but basically we had to digitize every traffic order right throughout the county borough, because the vehicle will pick up from the GPS where an order starts and where an order ends. So that took us a little while. What we also noticed as well around in introducing it, the traffic orders around schools also had to be completely regularized across the county borough as well. So we've done a big piece of work to enable the CCTV operation. We are working through costs with a view to potentially being able to purchase another vehicle for the county, because it is effective, but we're also having tremendous requests from members for that vehicle. So, and if I use the schools as an example, obviously the van can only be in one location at a time, and we target the schools have got specific orders in the morning and the afternoons, so it could take us on a cyclical program to get round all of those schools. You will appreciate will take a little bit of time, and probably a number of weeks. So we are looking to purchase a van to increase the actual enforcement. We're actually looking at the possibility as well not the possibility, we will, when we come to change the existing van, we will then go to a low emission electric vehicle, and if we purchase a new one now, that will also be electric, an electric vehicle. So in terms of resources, you'll see from personnel, our civil enforcement officers on the ground, ever since it was introduced and became a local authority's enforcement power back in 1999, I think it was a long time before I was in my current post. The team has more or less stayed the same. In fact, it might be less resource than it was when it actually was taken in-house. Now, in that context, since that time, I think we've had something like, over the last 20 years, an additional 600 enforceable traffic orders that have been implemented across the County Borough Council. And I think the number of surface car parks have also increased as well. Off-street car parks have also increased, as well as some of the country parks that we also enforce at the Knoll and Avon Country Park. So there are severe pressures really on the parking service, and every member within the council will understand that. We have parking pressures at the seafront, where we've had a lot of difficulties in the summertime, and a lot of our tourist destinations now are having real impacts as a result of them becoming more popular, and by that I mean the waterfall country. During lockdown, we had experience of some very difficult situations, like the Brombill in Margam, where people were visiting private reservoirs and the like. So we've been trying to react to that as well over the last couple of years. So if I pass you up, the other thing is as well, new developments. They have a substantial impact on our urban areas, and some of our residential streets are affected. We've had a lot of difficulty with displaced car parking, for example, down at the the university campus on Fabian Way, which Councillor Helen Kerry-Clark will be familiar with. And we've tried to deploy enforcement there as well when the university is got its terms in operation. So if I pass Steve over to perhaps explain the numbers and the rotas that we currently adopt, and just to add as well, we do ask the officers to do overtime as well to support nighttime enforcement. And the taxi ranks have been very difficult, but I know my licensing colleagues have also recently taken a paper through Cabinet, so that we'll be able to do a more joined up approach on the enforcement of the taxi ranks with our colleagues in licensing as well. So Steve, can I ask you to explain?
Thanks, David. Steve, if you'd like to come in. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, currently we've got on staffing levels of 10 officers, 2 seniors and 8 officers. they work a split shift, an early shift, Tuesday to Friday, Tuesdays to Saturday, sorry, 7:30 till 7 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and 10:30 till 6 in the evening. Tuesday to Saturday, 2 shifts. Sunday and Monday, due to rota days during the week, we only operate 1 shift currently due to staffing levels. We currently have 1 job out for advert because 1 person finished on ill health. So we will be looking to go back up to 9, I believe, because we've already got 1 senior on track and trace. So so that's where we are with the staffing levels at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks both for the comprehensive answers there. If I could bring in Councillor Ros Davis, please.
Chair, sorry, before we bring in Councillor Davis, I see Councillor Lynch has got her hand up. I think it might be to confirm if she's got declarations.
All right, in that case, if I can bring in Councillor Stephanie Lynch.
Yes, thank you. No declarations of interest.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Okay, Councillor Ros Davis.
Regarding on page 55, regarding the new parking meters, excellent that you can do it contactless now. I'm just wondering though, how easy is it to use, to put your registration number and everything, because in lots of places people seem to be having a lot of problems doing this.
It should be relatively easy, Councillor Davis. You just put the car registration in and you tap your contactless card against the machine and it'll operate it'll give you a ticket. What we're in the process of rolling out, and we've done it in the seafront as well, is cashless parking, where you can pay for your parking via the permit system that members are aware of. You can just log on and purchase a ticket. So if you went down the Abraham Beach at the moment, if you logged on to My Permit, which is the permit application we've got, you can purchase your ticket sitting on the beach if you wanted to.
There we are. All
they're much easier than the old machines then, are they, to use? And with clear instructions on use, because a lot of people are having difficulty in actually registering their cars in the first place on many machines.
Thanks, Councillor. If I can bring in David Griffiths there, please.
Yes, we've had a phased plan of renewal of all the pay and display parking ticket machinery. Some have gone to become solar powered stations, and some are hardwired. And over a period of time, the old machines obviously weren't bilingual, so we've had a big program over the last sort of 3 to 4 years where we've changed all of the meters now, and I'm pleased to say that they're all now bilingual, which is great. And we've also got obviously chip and pin payment, we've got cash payment, we've got contactless payment, and as Steve said, we've introduced pay by phone as well via the permit, and we're intending to roll out that pay by phone permit to all of our car parks. So we'll have all available options on payment then available to the public. So we hope to do that rollout now as fast as we can. And what we are noticing is that the cash collection is much reduced. So I don't know if you've got the actual figures to hand, Steve, but I would say that probably off the top of my head, at least 50%, if not more, of all payments are now made cashless. So much so that we've been able to review the cash collection system. So there's very little cash in our meters now. And we've put signage up to that effect because we have had a lot of attempts at breaking into the machines, And I think it's important that we make it clear that it's practically now cashless. There is no money in these meters, or they're not large sums of money, because we collect it twice, if not 3 times a week. So I think it's important to get that message out as well. There's not a lot of cash in these machines.
Thanks for that, David. If I can bring in then Councillor Joe Hale, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, when you mentioned there could be some grant funding for parking. In Kaiwen, we've got major problems with parking in certain streets. I mean, you can hardly get through there. I don't know how they manage if a fire engine had to get through, and I'm sure we got it throughout the whole of the borough. But would it be possible in certain places to take away some of the grass verges? Because they did it opposite the park. Coastal built some houses there, and they put in, parking. Just wonder if it'd be possible to take away, because they park on the grass verges anyway, and I don't think they're ever going to stop unless we enforce it. So if we could take away some of those grass verges for parking, it would be brilliant. Thank you.
Officers, anything to add to that?
As I say, we content to look at opportunities, Councillor Hale, where that may take place. We do involve Joyce Smith and our road safety team as well, depending on the location of them from a road safety perspective. We've actually, in some locations within the borough, we've advised against creating the parking on pavements, on grass verges, particularly around schools, and we've put other sort of mitigation measures in. So we're happy to look at opportunities. Again, it's very much about whether there's capital funding available for us to do that for members. The other thing which is very topical at the moment as well, and we haven't mentioned it, is pavement parking and the new legislation that is due to come in during the term of the current Welsh Government, where those powers are going to be passed from the police to local authorities in Wales. So that will mean an additional and added pressure for the enforcement teams, because I can imagine we're going to get inundated with calls to the call centre for enforcement of pavement parking. So that's going to be another big pressure that will be facing the service in the next year or two, once that legislation goes through process and the functions come to local authorities. And that brings a whole host of other things that we'll bring information reports back to members on as well. And I'll just give an example. If you took some of the residential streets that we've mentioned, if residents didn't park on the pavements, then no vehicles would be able to get through. If I cite an example in the Avon Valley, the top of the Avon Valley, we've got terrace properties that have got no other areas of parking other than on the street, and no bus services or vehicles could get through if all residents parked on the road on both sides of the road. So we'd probably end up having to exempt areas within the County Borough Council as well, which really sends mixed messages then. So it's going to be a really challenging piece of work. Or alternatively, which will be very, very unpopular, we'd end up putting a parking on one side of the road and traffic regulation orders on the other side that the CCT van could enforce, but that would push people right out of into other areas and residential areas for parking and create a pressure. So it's going to be really, really challenging in terms of pavement parking enforcement in the future.
Thanks, David, for that piece of extra work that I think will keep us busy on the committee soon. There we are. Councillor Charlotte Galsworthy, please.
Just to come back, you know, obviously when I mentioned about grants and things like that, and we said about looking at capital, the majority of the issues where I have are obviously the terraced houses, and the terraced houses are generally, if not all, are privately owned. So a number of these residents, when I've spoken to them, would be happy to actually look at contributing to the costs of these parking areas as well. So, and again, we've also got the social landlords as well, which again also have similar problems and land. So is it something that we could actually sit on the table and maybe look at putting a bit of a joint sort of effort into it, where we're actually working with residents for the solution? And even if it's, you know, sort of like a long-term lease of the land, which is obviously the council's up to towers and that, to them, and then them doing it, because obviously there's a lot of local businesses and that could use and do the work. Do you mean? Or, you know, things like that. So I think we've got to start being a bit more innovative as well and looking outside the box. And I think this would be a good example to start.
Thanks for that, Councillor Goldsworthy. Have we got any other speakers, Chloe?
Not that I can see, Chair.
In that case, then, as previously mentioned, the report is for noting. However, there is a recommendation on page 8. We have noted and considered the report, and following the discussions in the meeting today, officers will determine whether a further report would be required regarding expanding the current workforce. Is everybody okay with that? Yep. Okie doke then. We'll go on to number 5 on the agenda, which is the next agenda item is to select the appropriate items from the Cabinet Board agenda for pre-decision scrutiny. Please can members now turn to the Cabinet Board papers. Okay, the first item we have chosen to scrutinise is agenda item 8, which is an information report on the annual parking report 2021 to 22. This report is for information, and the reporting officer is Steve Cook. Now, before I ask officers to add anything, I can appreciate, and the committee can appreciate, that you may have had a lot of crossover with the earlier report on the scrutiny committee. So if I can ask you to just concentrate on what's on this actual item, and then we can move forward. Do our officers have anything to add, or shall I move straight to questions?
Happy for straight to questions, Chair.
In that case, I've got Councillor Ros Davies.
Apologies. Regarding the grit bins, well, after 3 years, I was...
Ros, that's the next one.
Oh, sorry.
This
My
is the
husband
annual
spoke
pack.
to me and I lost.
No worries. Okie doke. So in that case, then that's the only question I had on that item. We note that it's only for noting. So we'll move on then on to agenda item 10, which is the grit bins. And I'll bring in Councillor Ros Davies. Thanks.
Apologies, my husband was speaking to me, so I missed. Anyway, regarding the grit bins, I was hoping that after 3 years that we may be able to have more grit bins, especially in the areas where there are lots of hills, in my ward and in other wards, I'm sure. And also regarding bus routes, I've been unable to get a grit bin because of one road that's actually not a service bus route, but school buses travel there, and one bus 3 days a week. And of course, when the school bus gets stuck on ice, I've got to get the neighbourhood team out to grit the road. Now, if there was a bin available, then they would be able to do that. So I'm not very happy about the grit bins. And also, have you got replacement bins for the bins if anything happens to them?
I know we put the cart a bit before the horse here. And I'll ask Mike Roberts if he wants to come in on this and to give a bit of a background to the report as well and any other information, but also to answer Councillor Ros Davies's question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've been getting some delays on my line this morning, so hopefully it'll be okay. Yeah, this report, as you see in there, has been, as the policy was set back in 2012, and has been coming back on a sort of a 3-year review since that time. Members will not need me to remind them that members have had to take a lot of very difficult decisions over the last 10 years or more, with the austerity that went on and having to balance priorities between social services, education and environment at a headline level. And of course, one of the areas over the 10 years of austerity that was squeezed was the environment. And within the environment, one of the areas that was then squeezed was neighbourhood services. And this was one of a number of difficult decisions that were taken by members about restraining the level of service provision to within the available budget provision. So I recognise that it's been in place for some time, and again, last time it was reviewed, members asked that it came back. To answer about grit bins, yes, we buy batches of bins, and they are available for replacement. I was just looking at, happened to be looking at some figures for another report that's coming to you in the future, actually, about service. And I did see there were 3 grit bins that reported as damaged last year. And in last year, there were indeed 9 grit bins that went absent without leave. So we do have replacements, which we purchase, and of course they are available as in the policy where they are, they can be purchased and refills can be purchased, and we've done that as provided for under the policy for different places before now. So because the policy allows for fully funded grit bins, additional grit bins to be installed. I think all I could say is that if members were minded to review this policy, I think given that the no additional grit bin request has been entertained for 10 years, I could only suggest that you'd have to open a window and then look at the entirety of the requests from all members across the borough, and then look at that in the context of the budget round about how that is funded, and more importantly how they are maintained, because they do generate work, because obviously once we put them in we have to go and refill them. I noted that in addition to the regular refills that we do, there were 100 requests for additional refills last year. So the grit bins do generate service demand for the teams, and I appreciate that when there is bad weather, that generally creates work demands for all the teams. But we have got, as in all services, we have a finite level of resource, and we have to, which has to balance across a range of activities, whether that's sign cleaning, litter picking and grass cutting, and filling grit bins and everything else that the neighbourhood services teams do. So the budget position hasn't improved, so perhaps not surprisingly the recommendation coming forward is that the policy is maintained. But if, as I say, I think if you wanted to revisit that, you would have to, I would suggest you would open a window, look at the entirety of the requests, and then look at how that would be dealt with in the funding round for the council that's just starting off now. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Michael Roberts. Can I bring in Councillor Helen Kerry-Clark, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to ask, has a mapping exercise been done to actually show where the grit bins are? Because if you look around my ward, there are entire areas with no grit bins whatsoever. And last year in particular was leading to me having to make requests because doctors and nurses and what have you couldn't get out to go to work during the pandemic because of the lack of grip bins, because of the icy roads. And I think with climate change as well, we're getting colder winters. This is something we really need to look at, but we need to look at the equity across the borough, because I'm quite sure there must be some areas with lots of grip bins and some areas with none whatsoever. And, consider that everybody in Neath Talbot has difficulties during cold weather. Could we look at the equity of it as well, please? I would really be grateful if the committee would look into reopening this issue.
Mike Roberts, anything to add to that?
I think the only comment I would make is the eligibility criteria are in there, and obviously some areas of the borough have a lot more hills than others, so it's never going to be entirely equitable in that sense. But that's the only point I would make, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I mean, there is an opportunity that if we want to, instead of review in the future, I mean, we could bring something to the forward work programme and look at the possibility, I mean, given the possibility of any future funding to look into this, as I say, we're all constrained there with the budgets. I think, it's a good point that's been brought up, really. Okay, if I can go to Councillor Charlotte Galsworthy, please.
When Ellen said about obviously a map bin, I done one of my own ward in regards to grip bins, and I did actually pick out that when obviously you say about new housing developments, there was one, obviously a new housing development that didn't have one, and again, is that actually on a sort of a planning application clause as well? Which should be really for them to pay for it rather than us. And I know it's only a grip bin, but obviously it's a savings of money if it's a few of them. In regards to obviously a lot of the guidelines for consideration of the grip bins, which was previously put in 2012, a lot of that list is basically already on the existing one, because the bus routes are basically the grit routes. It's a steep hill, the current one is on the gradient of a hill anyway, which has grip bins. A cold area, well, a lot of places are cold areas, but I think it's not so much the cold area, it's the cold area which is shadowed by a lot of the trees, which some of the trees are actually on our property, and therefore it's the pavements that are affected, and even that's on the street. And I think you've got to take into account the actual age of vulnerability of the residents that live in them areas as well. So again, I think where it says about is the area prone to icing up, I think that is one that's got to be put on to the existing one, to be honest. And where it is about, is the grit bin likely to be used in that, then I'm sorry, but surely we'd already know that, because the call's coming in and it's like, is it asking to be refilled? And if not, then move it. And we basically done a mapping exercise with my street care supervisor, and we moved all of them into the right places. So again, I think that is, key. All the other things about, is there already a bin and things like that, they are just stupid lists, to be honest. So it's only the one, which is the prone to the icing up and the vulnerability, and I strongly suggest that that's actually put into the policy now. And again, if it's a strong enough case put to an officer to make a decision, he should have the discretionary power to put it there, but on a strong case. And I think that wording should be put into the policy as well. That's my views on it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Galsworthy. Councillor Helen, Kerry Clark, you wanted to come back?
Yes, thank you. The reason I was bringing up a mapping exercise is because under this policy, a member can move grip bins from one part of their ward to another. What if your ward has no grip bins? How is the member supposed to get a grip bin then installed in their area?
I'll ask that one to officers.
Well, as Councillor Kerry Clark has said, if there isn't a grip bin to move, there isn't a grip bin to move. Just to clarify, there is a layer on the council's geographical information system which covers where all the grip bins are. So we do have a map of where all the grip bins are present.
Okay then, members, we've got, let me have a look here now. This item is for decision. The recommendation is on page 152. Can I please have a proposer for this?
I move, Chair.
And a seconder, please.
Wait there now. Are we actually putting anything into this policy? Are we just actually keeping the policy as it is then?
We've got a recommendation to go through, you know, we are not altering it in any way unless...
Well, I don't move that because I disagree with that.
Okay, that's fair enough. Do I have a seconder for the recommendation? No? Okay.
Chair, in this case, if we can, obviously some members have suggested that they're not happy with moving the recommendation. If we just do a show of hands on who is happy with supporting the recommendation and who isn't. Because if members don't agree with it, they'd have to have, you know, an amendment to the recommendation.
I've received no notice of an amendment.
An actual solid amendment to be put forward. Otherwise, you know, that's kind of like the process.
As chair, and as I say, you know, I have received no amendment.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just come in here, that last proposal was not seconded, so the proposal is not there to be voted on. So now the committee really would have to decide whether they want to put an amendment forward to change the recommendation, or you go back to the substantive recommendation that's in the report, and then you go through a proposer and a seconder, and then you vote on it. So if members are saying that so what you want to ask first of all is, our members want to add something to the recommendation? Like what you're saying, does someone want to add something to the recommendation?
Yes.
May I come in, Chair, please?
Councillor Dennis Keogh.
Chair, I thought I heard during this meeting is that the areas that members are not happy with would be moved to the forward work programme, where it will be looked at again. Have I got that right?
No.
We can do that. We can say that we can put this as a piece of work to the forward work programme.
And has to be brought back.
Yeah.
Chair, so if it's the case that members want to do that, that's obviously something separate to look into. But in regards to this particular report, in order to if members aren't happy with the recommendation, if we would need an amendment from a member. So if Councillor Goldsworthy wasn't happy with putting it forward, we'd need something substantial from Councillor Goldsworthy in order to amend the recommendation.
Yeah, can I just come in, and I'd like the amendment basically about just for is the area prone to icing up be put in, and also that an officer would have the discretion with, you know, with obviously a valid case to go on. So it covers everything. That obviously then, if say a good solid case was put forward to an officer for a grit bin, then basically they have the powers then to authorise a grit bin, because then the current policy does obviously with the gradient hills, you can move things like this. But again, all areas are different. And again, it should be put on the planning as a clause. If it is a gradient housing complex, there's so many bins be put in that case as well. So I think an amendment just for them 3 points should actually be put in. And I think, you know, that then...
I mean, if I can just come in there, I mean, any sort of amendment would have to be correctly worded. We can't be vague on this, you know, and just sort of, you know, just sort of ramble on. But this is what we think. You know, as chair of the meeting, I've got to come in and I've got to say, look, you know, there's a recommendation that we go forward with this. I'll put the recommendation again to the committee. I mean, if they don't want to go forward with it, I mean, it can go on the forward work programme, and this report can come back at a later stage, possibly with a different recommendation after contact with councillors and officers. That's the only way to move progress here, you know. Otherwise, you know, we can't have amendments that are, you know, pages long to the recommendation. It would have to be a different recommendation. So what I'll do is I'll put it to the committee one more time. Other than that, as I say, we can not pass the recommendation. Officers can go away, have a look at it, and the report can come back to committee. Now, I'll ask one more time.
Chair, sorry, just before you go to the recommendation, I don't know if Mike wants to come in and say anything about what Councillor Goldsworthy has suggested, and I can see that Cabinet members also, Mike Harvey and Annette Wingrave, have their hands up if you want to go to them first.
Councillor Mike Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I think you know, when you look at a report, you go through it, and there's loads of things you could pick up and come back through. You know, I'm happy with the suggestion that this goes on the forward work programme and is looked at again. You know, I see no harm in that at all. You know, that's my view. And I'd say I hate coming on scrutiny because I chaired Cabinet scrutiny. I didn't like Cabinet members coming in, but I thought it important that I made that point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Wingrave, had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I see where Charles is coming from and other members, and I know we'd all like to make changes to our wards, and I fully support that, but you know, it has to be done through the correct procedures. This is a policy, and you can't make amendments at this point to a policy. Not in my eyes. You have to look at it across the board, budget and everything, and make allowances for finances. So I think the best course of action would be to do a separate piece of this by the Scrutiny Committee, whether that's task or finish or a work group or what have you, to decide exactly what they want to do so that officers can look at it within the financial limitations they've got and see what restructuring they can do. But I don't think you can just change a policy in a scrutiny meeting. You need to do the correct procedures, but I fully understand where they're coming from. We all have the same issues in our wards. Thank you.
Chloe.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, just to let members know that obviously it can be changed during the review. So the recommendation, you're just asking them to remain until the review is carried out. So like Cabinet members have said, you can have the item on your forward work programme, or if there's a task and finish group, we can definitely look into that. But obviously the recommendation is as it is today.
Thanks. On taking advice, then I'll read the recommendation again. If the recommendation doesn't go through, I suggest that we put it on the forward work programme, a review of the policy on the forward work programme, and we move progress that way. Okay, I'll ask then for...
Chair, sorry, Mike Roberts has got his hand up. Just
sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's helpful, but the message I'm getting is that perhaps it should say that the policy is approved in the interim pending a further review by the Scrutiny Committee under the forward works programme.
If I ask for the recommendation and it doesn't get seconded this time, then we'll obviously move then to a review under the forward work programme of the 3-year grit bin policy. I think that's the best way to move progress.
Chair, you have to take, if you have to take an amendment, like Mike is suggesting, before the substantive recommendation. So if Mike is saying that if a member wants to propose that and second it, you vote on that. If that falls, then you go back to the substantive recommendation in the report. So if that's if Mike is saying and members are happy with that, they would have to propose and second it, vote on that, and then if that falls, you go back to the recommendation in the report.
You know, as chair, can I accept an amendment from an officer?
No, it would have to be chair.
I propose what Mike said.
Right. Okay. So I haven't got sight of what the full, the amendment to the recommendation is. So if you can say it again, please, Mike.
That the policy be approved in the interim, pending a further review by the Scrutiny Committee under the Forward Work Programme.
Chair, you would just need to have someone to propose what Mike has just said. So Councillor Goldsworthy's proposed it, and then you would need someone. So Councillor Keogh was, yeah, it seems like there's a couple of seconders there.
No problem.
So then if we just get members to raise their electronic hands, if everybody else is happy then to move with that particular amendment.
Okay,
so if I could just ask you all to raise your electronic hand so I can get a view. Actually, Chair, I think what it might be best if I could ask them to lower their hands, and if there's anyone that is against what Mike has just said, please can you raise your electronic hand if you're against? I see none, Chair. So it looks like that particular amendment to the recommendation
is passed. So in the interim, we'll carry on.
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Right, there we are.
Thank you, Mike.
The final public item we have chosen to scrutinise is agenda item 12, which is the KPI performance indicators 2021-2022 for Q1. This item is for monitoring, and the reporting officers are Dave Griffiths and Mike Roberts. Do officers have anything to add, or shall we move straight to questions?
Go straight to questions, Chair.
I've got a question from Charlotte Galsworthy, Councillor Charlotte Galsworthy.
It's all right, it's an easy one. Do you know, obviously in the first ones, when it's the percentage of waste, reuse, recycling, composted and that, well, our figures now have gone up for our target, I believe, is 70%. Am I right in thinking that?
The current target is 64%, Councillor, and that is increasing. The next statutory target is 70% in 2024-25.
Right, okay. So obviously they'll be on the next. Right, okay, fine. And in regards to oh, I can't think what the other one was. Bear with me. No, it was on this KPI. I think it was about the sideways on the forward work programme, I think. Rob, was it my second question?
Well, as I say, if you just take the first question, then I can.
That's all for that then.
On the target, it was.
Sorry, I thought I answered that question.
No, sorry, he answered it. It's 70% is coming, obviously, on the next year.
Okay, then.
That's why 64 now.
So that's the KPIs. Right, okay. We'll go on then, as previously mentioned, this item is for monitoring. Therefore, we note the report. The next item is the forward work programme. We will now move back. We're going to scrutinise the forward work programme now. Just to add, you had a question on this, Charlotte, the forward work?
Yeah, in regards to the side waste it is. Right, currently the side waste, if obviously bins are left, and Mike, we had a conversation about before about when obviously the waste vehicles are coming in, there's no form or system to basically tell the side waste boys where them excess bags are. So if obviously then the member of public is actually phoning in saying that there's waste left or fly tipping, they don't know the difference between obviously the excess bags and fly tipping. And obviously fly tipping comes under the waste enforcement, yeah, and the excess bags come under side waste, yeah. So obviously then there was an announcement this week about obviously with press release from ourselves about obviously the fining. which again was the same one from obviously the policy in 2018, but it's gone from education more to prosecution now. So what I'm looking at is that I'd like to see figures and data more about the side waste and what the side waste are doing, like what orders, how many orders have gone out, how many fines have gone out since 2018, and obviously going forward now, since obviously they said they're going to get tougher. But obviously the public have raised a number of concerns, obviously, on that press release about, obviously, you know, some waste on the ground being left after the bin boys and things like this. And then we had actually got to be finding, you know, sideways. Again, it's still the issues. Have we got a system that knows the difference with the communal bags?
If I can come in there, Councillor, I think, Mike Roberts, what we want here is something to go on the forward programme concerning side waste restriction and, you know, the fines that are being introduced, etc. And, you know, if we could have this on the forward work programme for scrutiny, I'm sure Chloe could add something in that sort of area that we could add to the forward work programme. I mean, it's not necessarily, it's not a question, it's a case of do we add it to the forward work programme or not? And I'm sure the committee would want to add it just to get an update on the side waste.
And the systems and the details more obviously going forward on the work programme reports, yeah?
Would that be possible? Question to Michael Roberts.
Yes, so we can do a report. I mean, I know you've just had a workshop and added about 5 reports to the forward programme, which is fine. So perhaps we'll try and look at it as an addition to the fly tipping enforcement one that's already just been put on there.
That would be great, Mike Roberts. I mean, you know, if that comes on as well, then obviously it may address some of the concerns that members of the committee have. And further down the line on the work programme, we'll have the grit bins. Okay, item number 7, there are no urgent items.
Councillor Lynch has got a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Stephanie Lynch.
No problem at all. Again, I've got to preface anything I say with apologies if it's the wrong forum, because I'm still trying to learn, you know, what to ask and that kind of thing. Something that's been an issue with in terms of things that are on the forward work plan is the resourcing, and I know it's the word that we kind of dread, but I was just wondering if there is anything we as councillors can do, or anything we as a committee we can do to look at the resourcing issue in waste, because I'm sure most people here are aware that there was a huge impact on waste. Well, it wasn't my ward, I don't know about anyone else, and I'm just wondering anything we can do as committee supporters with this resourcing issue, because they're doing the best they can, and you know, the officers I work with are certainly brilliant and I've got to thank them, but is there anything we can do to make their lives easier?
Thanks, Stephanie. Lynch, Councillor Stephanie Lynch. If I can bring in Chloe.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Obviously this forward work programme is just for noting today. To do with the resourcing that Councillor Lynch has just mentioned, I can liaise with Mike Roberts after the meeting. I'm sure that it can fit into the report that's already come in, that was previously mentioned about waste, fly tipping. I think that's the, let me just get it up. It's on the 28th of January meeting. The report has come in, report on litter enforcement, fly tipping. So we can try and liaise with, you know, officers to fit in that into that report as well. I can see Mike's got his hand up as well.
Michael Roberts.
I suppose you wouldn't be surprised if I blow the trumpet for street care as part of the budget round, but of course, as members, you'll all be contributing to the budget round and the allocation of resources across the council. And I appreciate, you know, members have to take difficult decisions and to balance resources, but of course you do as members have that opportunity to look at the allocation of budgets to different service areas, street care being one of them.
Okay, Chloe, did you want to come back in, or do I go to urgent items now?
Yeah, so obviously you've mentioned about the grit bin policy being added, so we'll add that as well. I'll speak to officers outside the meeting to find a suitable date for that particular item. Yeah, so that's everything from me, Chair.
Thanks, Chloe. Urgent items, there are no urgent items. There's one private item on the Cabinet Board agenda which we have chosen to scrutinise. So I will now move to access to meetings. To resolve to exclude the public from the following item, pursuant to section 100A(4) and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972 and the relevant exempt paragraphs of Part 4 of Schedule 12A to the above Act. Can I please ask that any public or press in attendance now exit the meeting, and can the recording be stopped? Chloe, can you please